The last time I saw my neighbor, she was standing in her driveway at 3 in the morning, perfectly still, staring up at the sky. I didn't think much of it at first. I'd been up late finishing a work project, and I'd stepped outside to get something from my car. The streetlights hummed low and yellow, casting long shadows across the pavement. She was just standing there, arms at her sides, her hair unbrushed, wearing a thin nightgown in the middle of November. I remember the cold cutting right through my jacket, and I wondered how she wasn't shivering. I called out to her, "Hey, you okay?" She didn't turn, didn't flinch, just kept her face tilted up like she was trying to read something written across the stars. I took a step closer and then another, and I realized her lips were moving. Not whispering, just moving silently, forming shapes that didn't match any word I'd ever seen spoken. I said her name louder. "Meredith." And that's when she turned to look at me. Her eyes were open, fully open, like she'd forgotten how to blink. And she smiled, not a friendly smile, not a frightened smile. It was the smile of someone who has just understood something horrible and has accepted it completely. She said, "It's almost time," and then she walked back inside her house and closed the door. I stood there for a minute, the cold chewing at my fingers, trying to decide if I should knock on her door or just go back to my own house and pretend I hadn't seen it. I went back inside. I told myself she was sleepwalking, that the stress of her job had finally gotten to her, that I was overreacting. I was wrong. The next morning, Meredith was gone. Her car was still in the driveway. Her purse was on the kitchen counter. Her phone still plugged in by the living room couch. The police came and they asked me what I'd seen, and I told them everything. The sky, the moving lips, the smile. They wrote it down with that look cops give you when they're humoring you, and then they told me they'd be in touch. They never found her. But I started noticing things around the neighborhood, little things at first. The fact that all the outdoor clocks were stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. The battery-powered ones, the wind-up ones, the digital ones on the microwave displays. Every single one frozen on the same minute. I'd reset mine, and by the next morning it would be stopped again. I unplugged everything. It didn't matter. Then the birds disappeared, not just the ones in my yard, all of them. The whole neighborhood went silent. No robins, no sparrows, no crows, just empty trees and a stillness that pressed against my ears like cotton. The only sound at night was a low hum, like a refrigerator running deep underground. I'd lie in bed and listen to it, and I'd feel it in my teeth. My wife thought I was losing it. She told me to stop looking out the window. She told me to stop reading the police reports online. She said Meredith probably just had a breakdown and wandered off, that she'd turn up eventually. But my wife didn't see the way the grass started dying in rings around the house. Perfect circles like something had pressed into the earth from above, and she didn't see the footprints. I found them in the backyard a week after Meredith vanished. Bare footprints pressed deep into the frozen mud leading from the back fence to my bedroom window. Not running, not sneaking, just walking. One set coming toward the house, one set going back. And when I followed the trail to the fence, I found a single strand of long, blonde hair caught on the splintered wood. Meredith's hair. She had been standing outside my window at night, watching me sleep. I started locking the doors, all of them, double-checking the windows before bed. My wife laughed at me, but she didn't laugh when she woke up the next morning and found the front door wide open, the lock mechanism perfectly intact, as if someone had turned the deadbolt from the outside with a key they shouldn't have had. We called the police again. They dusted for prints, found nothing, told us to install cameras. I bought 4 of them and mounted them over every door that faced the street. The first night I stayed up watching the feed on my phone. Nothing moved. Not a cat, not a car, not a leaf. The whole street looked like a photograph. At 3:17 a.m., every camera went dark at the exact same second. Not a glitch, not a power outage. The footage showed the feed cutting cleanly like a knife through thread and then returning 30 seconds later with nothing changed. But I knew something had been in the yard during that missing time. I could feel it in the air when I stepped outside the next morning, a pressure like the moment before a thunderstorm, except there were no clouds in the sky. Just a pale blue emptiness that seemed higher than it should have been, thinner. I started walking the neighborhood at dusk. I don't know why, I just couldn't stay inside anymore. The walls felt too close, and every time I looked at my bedroom window, I thought of those footprints in the mud, coming and going and coming again. The other houses looked empty. Not abandoned, just empty. Curtains drawn, porch lights off. The Hummel house had a newspaper from 2 weeks ago still sitting in the driveway, and I realized I hadn't seen Mr. Hummel take out his trash in days. I knocked on their door, no answer. I looked through the side window. Their kitchen table was set for dinner. 4 plates, 4 glasses, 4 forks, a pot of something black and dried sitting on the stove, and a single sheet of paper in the center of the table folded into a shape I couldn't recognize. A triangle with a circle inside it. The paper was damp, and when I touched it through the glass, it stained the window with a greasy residue. I called the police again. They checked the house. The Hummels were gone, all 4 of them, no signs of struggle. No forced entry, just vanished like Meredith. And on their refrigerator, under a magnet shaped like a strawberry, there was a note in Mrs. Hummel's handwriting. They said the sky was listening. We had to go. The officer who showed me the note had a tremor in his hand. He told me they were opening a task force. He told me to be careful. He didn't look me in the eye when he said it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room with all the lights on, my phone in my hand, the cameras disconnected because I didn't trust them anymore. My wife had gone to bed early, and I was jealous of her ability to just close her eyes and pretend the world wasn't dissolving around us. I thought about calling my brother. I thought about packing a bag and driving until the gas ran out. But I knew somehow that it wouldn't matter. The thing that was happening wasn't in the neighborhood. It wasn't in the houses. It was in the sky. At 3:17 a.m., the hum returned. It was louder this time, deeper. It vibrated through the floorboards and up my spine, and I felt my fillings tingle in my teeth. I stood up, and without thinking, I walked to the front door. I didn't unlock it. I didn't turn the handle. I just stood there, listening. And then I heard the breathing. It was coming from outside. Slow, steady, wrong. Each exhale lasted too long, like something was trying to learn what air tasted like. I pressed my eye to the peephole, and the fisheye lens showed me my front porch, empty and washed in the yellow streetlight glow. Nothing there, but the breathing didn't stop. It was right on the other side of the door, close enough to touch, and I realized with a chill that sunk straight into my bones that the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the walls. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs. The hum grew louder and the lights began to flicker, not randomly, but in a pattern. Long dash, short, long, like a message, like a code I almost understood. The breathing in the walls started to match the flicker, and I could hear the shape of words forming, wet and guttural, syllables that didn't belong in any human throat. The front door handle turned by itself. Click! I grabbed a chair and jammed it under the knob. The handle rattled once, twice, and then fell still. But the breathing didn't stop. It was coming from the kitchen now, from the hallway, from the ceiling above my head. I ran to the bedroom and shook my wife awake. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "It's time," she said. Her voice was flat, her eyes were wide and unblinking, and she smiled, that same smile Meredith had worn in the driveway, the smile of someone who understands something horrible and has accepted it completely. "What did you say?" I whispered. "It's almost time," she said, and then she stood up, walked past me, and opened the bedroom window. The screen fell out and hit the grass, and the hum poured in like water from a broken dam. The sky outside was wrong. The stars were too bright, too close, and they were moving, not falling, just shifting slowly, rearranging themselves into something that looked like a face. A face with too many eyes. A face that was looking down at our house with the patience of something that had been waiting for a very long time. My wife stepped onto the windowsill. I grabbed her arm, but she didn't resist. She just turned and looked at me with those empty eyes. "You can hear them too," she said. "You just don't want to admit it yet." And then she climbed out into the yard and started walking toward the back fence. I screamed her name. I chased her. But by the time I got outside, she was gone, not vanished like the others, just gone like she'd stepped into a shadow that wasn't there anymore. The humming stopped. The stars went back to their proper places, and I was alone in the cold grass, barefoot, shivering, listening to the silence. I haven't slept in 3 days. I found a piece of paper in my wife's nightstand, folded into that same triangle circle shape. When I unfolded it, the inside was covered in tiny, precise handwriting that I didn't recognize. It wasn't my wife's. It wasn't even English, but I could almost read it. The symbols squirmed under my eyes, and I understood just for a moment what they meant. A countdown, a date, a time, 3:17 a.m. It's almost here. They're almost done listening. And tonight, when the stars start shifting again, I'll open my own window. Not because I want to, but because I finally heard what they've been saying, and they said my name.